Hello, 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 everybody. Please take your seats. We're going to get started. Oh, you're controlling the slides. This is Cass's, I think.
Yeah, but it's on mirrored mode.
Oh.
So I think where's the mouse?
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Arrow
I
keys.
see, I see. Welcome, everybody. Welcome. I am Cheddar. This is CJ over here on the little corner, and Cass over there as well. She's giving a talk tonight. We are the organizers. Marlena's out today. She'll be back. If you need anything, feel free to reach out to us. Food in the back. There's bathrooms on both sides of the kitchens. And if you have time to get a name tag, you don't have one, they're over there on that table. I forgot. Yes, I forgot the order of these slides, so I'm going to have to turn around and look at them. Am I going backwards? Yes. Okay, code of conduct. I don't remember all of the rules, but it basically says be a good person. Try not to make anyone uncomfortable. If you run into any problems, you can reach out to us, let us know. There's also an email address, I think, which if you have any problems, let us know. But we just want everyone to be happy, have a good time, make sure no one's upset, basically. That was the ground rules that I just went over. And we are live at DenverScript on YouTube. That's what CJ's running over there. He's got these little buttons that he pushes, and he's got the microphone for the live stream. So we record this. You can watch it back after. When we do Q&A questions later on, make sure you have a microphone. We'll come around with a little spatula and a microphone on it. That's mainly for the live stream, but also some people, maybe if they can't hear you in the crowd here, they can hear you as well. And these are our sponsors. Code Talent, this is the building you're in. They provide the drinks, the space, the chairs, this projector, all this stuff. So we're very thankful to them. If you're looking for a job, you can talk to them and they can help try to find you a job somewhere. They are recruiters who know the difference between Java and JavaScript. And also, for this meetup, we have Magic School, which is a new sponsor to us. Magic School is a local Denver-grown startup. Our mission is to create tools and platforms that help reduce teacher burnout and introduce AI literacy to educators and students. To date, over 5 million educators in 10,000 school districts have joined our platform, and we save educators an average of 7 to 10 hours a week. Very hard to come by for teachers. We're always looking to make great hires, especially locally, so if you're interested, email Joa, Joah, at magicschool.ai and learn more about them online. They provided the food for us, so thank you to Magic School for helping us out. We're always looking for sponsors or talks as well. Please reach out to us at DenverScript@gmail.com if you're interested in sponsoring. We need a sponsor for the food. Code Talent always provides the space for us, which is very nice. And if you want to submit your talk, go to DenverScript.com. You can submit a talk there if you need help putting a talk together. Any of our organizers have experience putting talk together, or if you want to do dry runs, those kinds of things. Let us know. If you need topic ideas, we've got 1 billion, I'm sure, that we can come up with. So if you're interested in giving a talk, reach out to us, please. Oh, that's the end of that. Okay. Next, let me make sure I didn't forget anything. Is anyone hiring? No? Okay. Anyone looking for a job? We got several of those. All right. Again, speak to Code Talent if you're looking for a job. Check them out. I'm curious to hear how that experience is. And we're going to skip JS news today. So we're going to basically jump into our talks right away. First, we have our very own Cass. She's going to be doing Meetup Talks in this economy? Yeah, and here's how you can start. So Cass's bio, she has been in the industry since 2017 and enjoys helping other people shine. She likes people, places, and things. And I'm going to hand it over to Cass.
right, I'm going to get set up real quick, get my slides showing. Oh no. I have no control. Okay, we can do it from here. Awesome. Hello, everyone. I'm seeing a ton of new faces, so hello, nice to meet you. Uh-oh, something's happening. Oh, okay. Okay, cool. Yes, so the first talk tonight is just a quick little non-technical lightning talk called Meetup Talks in this economy. Yeah, and here's how you can start. We needed an extra talk tonight, and I've been noodling on this for a while, that we don't have a lot of like new faces all the time. We've got Bishop. We've seen you around, but this is gonna be, I think, your first time speaking at DenverScript, at least in the new age of DenverScript. So that's gonna be great, but I'd love to see even more people in the community. So I wanted to do a quick little overview, touch a couple of topics that come up when I talk to people about doing meetup talks or conference talks, and hopefully I'll see you on the conference circuit. So a little bit about me. My name is Cass. I feel that I am a trustworthy person for this particular topic for several reasons. One, I've delivered like a handful of uncountable technical talks and non-technical talks. I was also once technically a paid actor, so I've got experience in front of a crowd. I'm also deeply interested in the like vibrancy of the Denver developer community, and I feel that getting all of us more visible in like the greater developer community of the US and the world can only benefit the community and ourselves. I am a web developer, a former educator, and a former performer, so coming at this from a lot of angles. Before we dig in, you might be thinking, I don't want to do a talk, so why should I listen to this particular lightning talk? And it's okay if you want to zone out, I understand. I won't be mad. But I think that there are a lot of benefits that come with giving talks that we don't particularly think about when we are exploring the option. So I want to pose the question, how can giving meetup and conference talks benefit your career? Because it has benefited mine. I'm going to cover 4 particular benefits. There are plenty more that you might find when you experiment. But number 1 is visibility, 2, connection, 3, confidence, and 4, learning. When you are up in front of people, everyone sees you, everyone gets to know your name. It's really hard for someone to say, I want to recommend Cass for a job if they've literally never even seen me before. But there's like, 40 people, 30 people out here that now know my name, a little bit about me. So I'm already visible. Y'all might already consider me for a position in the future, especially if we network further and become friends. So visibility. 2, connection. This is kind of similar. It's really hard to walk into a networking event and have like very little in common with people besides I do the same job or I do a similar job. It's hard to start conversation. But if you've done a talk, people will just come up to you. It's magic. You don't even have to do any work after that. They just come up and say, hey, thanks for the talk. Wanted to ask you about such and such. Boom, connection. People add you on LinkedIn if you've got LinkedIn. People will see you at the Develop Happy Hour. I think it's like the first or second Tuesday of the month, by the way. They'll see you at the happy hour and they'll say, oh, I saw your talk at DenverScript. And now we've made friends. Boom, easy peasy. Number 3, confidence. This one, your mileage may vary, but I have found that it's helped build my confidence, helped establish me more in the industry. I've always felt like a bit of an outsider. I've always felt a little bit like an imposter, and giving these talks gives me a chance to show off some technical skills. It gives me a chance to step out of my comfort zone and kind of like, step into the industry. And then lastly, there's learning involved. Of course, there's learning involved. I'll shrug a little bit because you have to prepare a talk and maybe research a topic a little bit, dig deeper, prepare for questions, that sort of thing. But yeah, it's great either way. Okay, so benefits. Let's talk barriers. So there are plenty of barriers, more than what's on the screen, but I want to touch on two. I hear these two the most commonly. So one, I don't have anything to talk about. And two, I am terrified and or literally the worst public speaker on the planet. Totally fair points, and I get it, and valid. But both of these items are skills. So like any other skill, we can build them, we can improve them. You might not want to, and in that case, fair. You don't have to do a talk. But if you're at all interested, it is a skill that you can build. I want to talk about how you might jump into building both of these skills, and we're going to start with coming up with a topic. So you don't have anything to talk about? I bet you might. When I come up with a topic, I kind of consider three things, and they're all experience-based. I ask myself the following three questions. Are there any concepts, topics, ideas that you find yourself excited or upset about at work or maybe during study? Anything kind of related to like your goal. If your goal is DenverScript, you might want to consider JavaScript, right? Write down everything. Don't filter. This could mean that you're going to write down the word design paradigms. It's really broad. You might even write down something more specific, like a specific method of a web API that you were excited about or that you found interesting. Maybe you write down something like burnout. Anything counts. It doesn't even have to be like exactly on topic, anything tangential. The next question I ask is there anything you have struggled with in the past that you overcame? There could be a lot of things. Maybe you implemented some particularly tricky authentication, or maybe your coworker got a promotion when it should have been you. These things are valid things to write down. Write them down. The last question I ask myself is, what have I recently completed at work or in study? Let me cough real quick, sorry. Spring comes with allergies. But what have you recently completed at work or in study? And this is literally everything. If you like wrote a lame method the other day to like transform a string, write it down. If you maybe completed a huge feature that is kind of unique, maybe other developers are not used to it, write it down. All of this is valid. If I were going to write down my ideas for today, they might look something like this. And you'll notice that it's kind of all over the place. We've got like something about docs, some tools. We've got some like related, like just general job stuff. We've got like mental health stuff. It's all over the place. Now, none of these are like, I wouldn't describe them as like a thesis, right? I don't have a talk based on one of these topics, but I can build a talk. And I can build a talk by considering my angle. So on any one of these given topics, I can explore how I might want to dig into them. I might want to dive into a topic by highlighting it or exploring it. I might want to argue a point, or I might want to illustrate my journey, like kind of like a story arc. If I were going to choose one of my topics that I had written down, like global state management, this is how I might dive into it to discover if there was a talk inside of that topic. So if I wanted to highlight it, I might say, okay, let's do a walkthrough of Zustand. Or maybe let's compare and contrast tools. Maybe let's do like a high-level overview of like what even is global state management. Okay, nothing sparks joy yet. Maybe I want to argue. So maybe I want to justify why certain apps should utilize global state management or not. Or maybe I want to assert like why you should use a certain tool. That sounds a little bit more fun. And then I might also come at it from an angle of like illustrating my journey. So maybe I'll give like a walkthrough of like how I took an app that was really well established with Redux and implemented RTK with it instead, Redux Toolkit. All of these are talk topics. We already have them. They're good to go. So I hope you'll start asking yourself these questions. Go back on the YouTube video and watch this if you want to know what those questions were, to brainstorm some topics of your own. The next barrier is public speaking. And I only have 2 suggestions for this. I would vote lower your stakes. There is no reason to sign up to speak on CNN or something. Just invite your friends out to the brewery and say, hey, I'm going to give you a talk on roller skating for 5 minutes. Prepare yourself. Boom. You've lowered your stakes and you've got a really good practice session. That leads me into my second piece of advice, which is practice. The only real way to build skills, you can read about things as much as you want and gather knowledge, but building skills requires practice. And I'm going to encourage you to do this in kind environments. Give a talk to your friends. Give a talk to your pet. Record yourself. Reflect on it. And seriously, I know it sounds cringe, record yourself giving a talk and then write yourself feedback. But in all honesty, that's a really good way to see oh, I do some really weird stuff when I speak and I need to practice that out. So I'm gonna record it again and see if I can avoid doing that one weird quirk. I'm gonna give some tips on what you should watch for when you're practicing. So first of all, consider your audience. If you're just standing in front of a camera, it's really hard to do so, but pretend anyways. So for example, I watched myself give this talk earlier and I was like, ugh, I'm kind of bored at this point. And if I were in the audience, I'd be like, ugh, when is this gonna end? So I put this cool emoji up there. It's really cute and maybe it'll spark some joy for people. I also encourage you to practice enunciation. I'm not super great at this because I'm really used to just conversing locally with people. But enunciate, you might speak a little louder than you normally do, even with a mic. Otherwise, it's really hard to hear. I would encourage you to watch your hands. I speak a lot with my hands. I move them around a lot, but things you might want to watch for are hair twirling, or picking at your face, or adjusting your clothes a lot, or some people even itch out of nervousness. These things you'll catch by recording yourself. I encourage you to find a friendly face. Tonight even, I know there are a couple of people out there who are nodding along with me and they've got their eyes on me. A lot of people have their eyes up here, so thank you. But find a friendly face. That person's gonna be your live feedback. You can kind of see when their eyes glaze over and you need to change your pace or your tempo. You can see if they're interested, all of that jazz. I would encourage you not to apologize unless you're a comedian. If someone's up here and you make a mistake, plow through, keep going. Listen for ums. I literally just did an I don't know if you heard that. Literally just did it. You can have a friend kind of jump whenever you say to kind of visually tell you, oh, I did it. I need to practice it out. You can record yourself. Once you start listening for filler words or you'll start to be able to build them out of your speech. I encourage you to time yourself. And then I encourage you to seek out tools for nerves. It's gonna be different for everyone. It's not a one-size-fit-all solution. Maybe you eat a banana when you're nervous. Maybe you exercise before a talk. Maybe you do some mindfulness exercises. All of these things are great, but I encourage you to research something. Cool. So this has been a bit of a whirlwind. We've covered a few things, such as benefits of giving a talk, so I hope you'll consider it, entertain the idea. We've also brainstormed topics. At least I showed you how I might do it and gave you 3 questions that you can noodle on when you're trying to think of a topic. I've also encouraged you to lower the stakes and practice if you're uncomfortable with public speaking. It will improve, and I'm not gonna say that every talk's gonna be great. I've had some really bad ones, gone home crying. But at the end of the day, I don't regret doing it. I learned a lot. It was still beneficial. I even, made some good connections afterwards. No one wants you to fail, so they're okay if you make mistakes. And so with my last minute and 9 seconds, I'm going to encourage you to noodle on this tonight, tomorrow, this weekend, and come up with a lightning talk. Submit it to DenverScript. You can go to the website, DenverScript.com, and then click the Submit a Talk link. It takes you to a Google form, I think. And submit it because I do believe we're doing lightning talks next month, and I'd love to see some new faces. Yes, whirlwind, but thank you. That's my talk on Meetup Talks in this economy. My name is Cass. I do not have contact information, as you can tell, but stick around for the next talk. Thanks, y'all.
Check. Who is considering giving a talk now? Yeah? Couple of hands? Nice. Who here learned a new library or framework or language recently? Anyone? That's a talk. Who here solved a crazy bug recently at work? That's a talk. Who here, I don't know, but you have a talk. Please give a talk, DenverScript.com. All right, we're going to take a quick 3-minute break, and then Bishop will be talking about TypeScript, but feel free to grab some pizza or drinks in the meantime. We're going to get started in a minute and a half. So wrap up your conversations, grab some food, minute and a half.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back. The next talk coming up is the Journey of TypeScript from Any to Unknown with Bishop Zara. Here's a little bio about him. He has over 20 years experience crafting novel experiences for the web, mobile, and immersive environments. You can see his work at bishopz.com. I went there, a lot of stuff on there. You've done a lot of work. All right.
Check. Oh, thank you. Yeah, thanks. Check. Okay. Yeah, hi. Thanks, everybody, for coming. From Any to Unknown, because that's the direction that we want to move in. Yeah, my name is Bishop Zara. I do have bishopz.com. There's just different weird stuff that I've done over time on there. And I'm not here on behalf of my company, right? I'm not here because someone asked me to. I'm here very much, piggybacking on Cass's presentation. I read a book, and I thought there was some neat stuff in it. So I made a little presentation about it. And particularly what I wanted to present was the things that helped me understand TypeScript. So wanted to try and share that stuff. A lot of this stuff does come from effective TypeScript. Not that I stole it, but I rewrote it because they're just general ideas. But it's a really good book. You can get it out of the library if you want. I think it's a good idea. And particularly I was looking at some things, since TypeScript and JavaScript are so similar and you're writing in both languages at the same time, I felt like people who had learned both TypeScript and JavaScript at the same time, maybe didn't quite understand how to tease them apart, like when we were doing one versus the other. And then a lot of times that I've given this presentation, the questions at the end are like, well, we're still on JSX. How do we get to TSX? How do we get from JavaScript React code to TypeScript React code? So at the end, we'll go through, kind of chart out what that path is. Yes. So I'm going to use some math words. I know when I first started getting into programming, I didn't really like math words. They kind of scared me a lot. My brain would just turn off a little bit. Don't turn your brains off, please. I'll just use a couple right at the beginning. It's like my flowery intro that I wanted to give. So please, don't be scared. So TypeScript is a set of types. So in mathematical terms, that means it's set theory. And a long time ago, there was a mathematician who came out with a theorem of set theory that said that any set of things can either be complete or it can be consistent. Can't be both. Can't be both. So TypeScript had a choice to make, and they chose complete. So what does complete mean in that sense? What that means is that anything that's in JavaScript can be modeled by TypeScript. There's nothing you can do in JavaScript that TypeScript can't model, can't account for. So it is complete in that sense. But in order to do that, they had to introduce this one inconsistent part, and that is the any type. Any is magical. In mathematical terms, it is both a superset of every other type and a subset of every other type. It is its own grandfather. Like, that doesn't make any sense in terms of logic, and that's why it's the inconsistent part. Every other part of TypeScript follows all the rules of logic, but not the any type. So it's it's magical, and we don't really want it. It disables type checking, right? And the whole point of running TypeScript is to get type checking, so any just disables it. It allows things to break contracts. That's an example we'll look at. And it spreads. That's the really ugly part. So, just to sum up everything, the unknown type in TypeScript is better than any. It's always better than any. And I often say that any is not publishable code. Like, you should never go to production with any. Now, I'm going to soften that a little bit at the end, because there is a time and place that we might need to use it. But in general, if we can use unknown instead, we should. And then one of the examples that we'll look at is creating an is function so that we don't have to use the as keyword, because the as keyword can also do some ugly stuff. All right, so let's jump in. Oh yeah, if you guys do have a question, I'm just gonna barrel forwards. I may not even see it, so flail around, do whatever you have to get my attention, please, because I do want this to be interactive. But these were three examples. These three examples were very troubling to me when I first started learning TypeScript. I mean, here we create this property, we typed it as an empty object pattern, and yet we gave it a string. No TypeScript errors. TypeScript's totally fine with that. I'm like, but it's supposed to be doing type checking. What's the problem here? And we try lowercase o object, and we give it an array. That's totally fine. Uppercase O object, we give it a number. It's totally fine. No problem with that. So we need to understand why this is true. We understand why is it not erroring in these cases. So in order to kind of dig that up or understand it better, I created this little object barn. We got our objects in it. And these are all different ways of typing something as an object in TypeScript. Now, we could use the uppercase O object, but we never do that. Don't ever do that. The reason being that uppercase O object actually refers to the JavaScript class of object. And TypeScript and JavaScript are two different things, and so we don't want to mix the two. We really want to keep them in separate universes. So then TypeScript provides a lowercase o object that we can use to type it, but it can be an array, it can be null, it can be undefined. It's really inspecific. It's just not a good type. And then oftentimes I see this all the time, people use the empty object pattern, and that just does not mean what you think it means. Like as a JavaScript programmer, you think, oh, well, that's an object. No, it just means that it's not undefined or null. It can still be a string and a number. So this is just also horribly inspecific. And so what does TypeScript want us to do? It wants us this. It wants a shape, which is an object with a property where we tell it what the type of the property is. That is the ideal solution for TypeScript. The problem is that a lot of times you build this as your type, and then you come back and you're like, oh, actually, we don't need that property. And what are you left with? The empty object pattern, which doesn't mean what we think it means. So just got to be careful about that. Now, a good definition of an object is this generic object. I created it right here. Now, you'll notice that the highlighting is showing a different syntax than what I wrote it in. That's part of the hard part about learning TypeScript is there's two different ways of writing it. So people bounce back and forth between type and interface. And I could call that interface, and the only difference is I don't put an equal sign here. Oh, I can't do that one. But in any event, there are two different syntaxes. So we won't use this syntax very much. I'm going to stick to this one. But in TypeScript, the word record just means an object. And you pass it these two properties inside the square brackets. The first one is the type of the key, and the second is the type of the value. And we're just using unknown. We know the keys are going to be strings, but we don't know what the values are going to be. So this is a great generic object definition. And I have added this to probably 20 different code bases at this point. It's just this one line of code, but it just comes in so handy so frequently that I'm always adding it to the code base. And if we did look at the JavaScript specifications for an object, the keys can be strings. The keys can also be, numbers. That's what you would call an array-like object, is an object that uses numbers for its keys. Interesting. And there's the one everybody forgets about, symbols. What are symbols? You don't really have to care because they're not very useful. So really, I mean, and do we care about array-like objects? No. So we can just go back to just a simple string and unknown, and this is a great generic object. Okay, cool. So now that we understand that, armed with that knowledge, let's dig into any a little bit. So here's an example of any letting us break contracts. If we give this variable age the any type, and then we put a string in there, and then we operate on it like it's a number, we're not going to get the result that we think. So this is a bug. This is a bug just waiting to happen. And once we type it as any, TypeScript is totally fine with all of this. It's like, sure, do whatever you want. And the problem with that really is even if we create another function and we did accurately type our function, well, we can still pass that any value to it. And it's like, sure, any's a number. Any can be anything. So no TypeScript error. So these are the kind of things that we want to avoid because they would, assumedly, this function has to have a number or else it's not going to work right. And we just gave it a string. So let me juxtapose here the difference between unknown and any. With any, all of the TypeScript, all the type checking is disabled. So everything is just any and no errors ever. And so it's a great way just to get rid of the errors. That's why I see a lot of people are like, I'm tired of dealing with these errors. Just type it as any. Now I don't have to deal with any of them. And of course, that's because it disables type checking. So, but when we create something as unknown, you get this error. Error is of type unknown. Well, I knew that it was of type unknown. But what it's saying here is that if we access a detail property, then we know something about error. It's not completely unknown. We know something about it. And all it wants us to do here is just declare the thing that we're trying to use. And then the error goes away. So we just have to tell it what it is that we want to use. We don't have to create a complete definition of what error is. We just have to tell it what we want. And that's all that it wants. And so going back to unknown, if if we legitimately don't know what the properties of this thing are, if we legitimately don't know what this thing is, then we can just type it as unknown and it would be fine. As long as we don't access any property, it's totally fine with that. Any spreads. So this is an imported function. The idea here is that we imported this function and we imported this function. We didn't even write any of this stuff. But somebody way long ago created this function and they used the any type. And since they use that as the input and they output that as well, the function outputs an any. So then somebody else made use of their parse function, but even though we passed a string into it, since we returned what they returned, it's going to return an any. It's going to return an any. So then when we go to use that parse YAML function and give it some YAML, our book here is still just any, which means we can access properties that don't exist. We can call book as a function. None of that stuff causes any problems. Not because we did anything wrong, but because way long ago somebody used an any and it spread all the way through to our code. So not great. So these are two that I've seen in the wild. And they're valiant attempts. Like, I celebrate. I'm like, it's a good idea. You know, they're like, I know I shouldn't be using an any. But at least what I can do is just provide some structure around it. But even if you provide structure around the any, eventually the promise will resolve. And eventually you're going to try and access one of the indexes of the array. And it's going to be any, and then it'll start spreading from there. So this doesn't solve the problem. It doesn't really even help. Okay. So yeah, don't ever do this. We shouldn't set random properties on the document object. The document object is part of the browser. We should let the browser be the browser. But sometimes you have to. And aside from just document, this is an example of a library that you don't control. Like, what happens when you have to put a property onto an object, but that object already has a definition and it doesn't include your property? Animal does not exist on document. And if I look at this definition, yeah, here it is. Oh wait, no, I have to click one more time and return. And yeah, it's all of this. This is the definition of the document object. And I don't want to mess with that. I certainly don't want to replicate it. It's just a whole bunch of stuff. I don't even want to look at it. So one way to solve this would be this. We just as any. We make document into an any, and then we can add anything we want onto it. Super sus. Yeah, don't do this either. This is a bad idea. Okay. So this used to work. In the newest versions of TypeScript, this doesn't work anymore. The idea is that the interface keyword is additive. So we don't have to redeclare all of document. We can just add a new interface for the same name as the class that it uses and add whatever property we want onto it. That's not working anymore. You have to do it now with type. So with type, it's similar, it's just a little bit different. We say a document with props is our new type, and it's going to be the type of whatever document is, but we're also going to add onto it our new property. And that allows us then to still use the as keyword, but this is a better use of the as keyword because we're not saying as any, we're saying as this new type that we've created. And so document originally is going to be document, but then inside these it's going to be the new document type, and that allows it to have the property string that we wanted. Yep. This is one, if you're familiar with TypeScript already, you've probably seen this, but this is one, it's just so handy, it comes in so handy all the time that I wanted to call it out. When you provide an object, TypeScript does what's called inference, so that you don't have to add every type to every little thing. It tries to look at your code and just try to figure out what it is that you've got there. And states here, we didn't provide any type at all. So this definition is all TypeScript's inference. And you can see how TypeScript infers these things. It says, well, there's two properties and they both have strings in them. Makes sense. If you just add this as const onto the end, Notice it's different than the const at the beginning, which declares the variable. That's JavaScript. This is TypeScript, and it tells the inference engine to just be a little more specific. And now join can't be just any old string. It has to be those 4 specific letters. So it's a way to get really strong typing. And so if you have constants files or enums, big long lists of these property names that stay the same, as const is a very easy way to get strict typing. Okay. Yeah, what's up? Even if you declare an enum, you can still add as const on the end. And it just, the difference is the enum is in JavaScript. The as const tells TypeScript to treat it like an enum. Okay, so prefer unknown to any. Anything is better than unknown, but sometimes unknown is the correct thing. So this is my example, is that we have some object foo and some object bar. And foo has a type and is a very thorough definition. And bar has a type and is a very thorough definition. And we somehow, what we want to get from foo to bar, we want to take this value, but instead of this original definition, we want to say it now has the new definition. And the problem comes if you just do it like this. You can see there's no error, but we would get an error if these 2 definitions don't sufficiently overlap, which if they're not similar enough for TypeScript to be able to figure out how to put them together, it'll give you an error here and it'll say they don't overlap enough. And it will recommend as unknown, as bar. So first we type it as unknown, then we type it as bar. This is a perfectly good use of unknown. And I would complain if an engineer turned in any in that place. And they would argue, they would say, well, what does it matter? All right, it's foo, it starts off as foo, and then it is any for the briefest of milliseconds, and then it's bar. So who cares? Like, it can't spread out of there, can it? Well, the thing is, my contention is that we don't write code for ourselves. We don't write code to satisfy some JIRA ticket. We write code for the next engineer that's going to come across our code and have to change it. And when we leave a little bomb in the middle of our code like that, very often someone's going to have to come and pull this apart and add some new things in between. And when they do, they're going to have any in there. So we just really don't want to even give it that briefest of moments. So another example that I see a lot is when you're parsing some API results, like we would get some API endpoint, and we don't know what the API is going to give us. So we type it as any initially, and then we just have confidence that we're going to do all the typing correctly, that our code is going to be perfect and bug-free. We have confidence, and then when we get to the end, well, book is any, sure, but we can then just type it as type book. And so selected book, gets the correct type. And the thing there is, again, in the way that I'm using the term confidence here, we don't want engineers to have confidence in their code. We want them to prove that their code works. And that's what you use TypeScript for. It just proves that your code is correct. So any lets you get around that, but then you have to have confidence. Not a good pattern. Okay. So this is really what we're trying to get to. How is it that we accept something that is truly of an unknown value and then give it an accurate type? So here we created a type called book, just has name and author. And what we're trying to do is create something like a process result function that does receive something that is truly unknown. Like, we don't know what that thing is. And then we want to have some function that determines whether or not it is of the correct type. And if it is, then it returns it. And if it's not, then it returns null. And you can see the inference happen here. Result is of an unknown, but after this function runs, result is now of type book. And if I look at the entire function, it returns either a book or null, not something that's unknown. So how do we create this isBook function to allow us to do this, to certify that unknown is of the correct type? Okay, so here's our first version of it. Now, when I say an is function, we could have used as. We could have just said, type this as a book, but then, we're not doing, we're certifying it with our own confidence, not with actual code. So an is function does that kind of certification, and I'm talking about this is right here, not this one. This is just the name of the function. But here is the type that we gave the function. This is its return value, and we say it's going to return value is a book. And that's in TypeScript, that's the way that you say this function certifies that it is of this type. And we get down here, oh, we got an error. Property name does not exist on type object. And this error message used to frustrate the living bejesus out of me. I used to hate this error message. I still kind of don't like it. Because coming from a JavaScript world, you're like, what do you mean name doesn't exist on type object? It's an object. I'm trying to test to see if it has a name property. Why won't you let me do that? And there's a little hint, and it's right there. And if we recall all the way back to the beginning, lowercase o object doesn't mean what we think it means, coming from JavaScript world. And so we can see exactly what happens here. Value comes in. At first, it is unknown. And then we say, is its type of an object? And after that, it's like, yeah, it's either object or it's null. So we say, well, let's make sure it's not null. And we get down here, and it says, okay, yeah, it's of type object. But we know type object can include arrays. So we want to say, let's make sure this is not an array. And then we get here, and oh, we still have the same underscore O object. It's not like object, but not an array, because TypeScript doesn't have a way really to say that. And certainly in its native built-in types, there is no type that's like object, but not an array. So the inference engine, what TypeScript is doing as it goes line by line, it's trying to figure it out, but it just doesn't have any better type to put there. So it still thinks it's an object, so we still can't access a property of it. So what we have to do is we have to fix these three. We have to fix that step, the step right here, in the inference, because it's not working. And the way we do that is with an is object. So we said the same thing. We're using our generic object definition. Value is a generic object, and we're only going to do the first 3 lines. And it still only considers this lowercase o object, but we have done all the tests that we need to do to certify, yes, indeed, it's that type, which means when this function returns, it will return the value as that type. So very easily, we can just comment those out. Whoop, and say amper is object value. Notice our errors go right away. First, the object comes in as unknown. Then we run this function. And since this function produced true, we know now that value is in fact a generic object. Generic objects can have properties. And so we test for name and author and verify that they are the same as the definition. And boom, we have a nice little isBook validator. Yay! All right. We are speeding through this stuff. Does anybody have any thoughts or questions or comments about any of that? Yes, please.
Is there, that looks like boilerplate. Is there a helper function to do that in TypeScript or utility? No.
That's the keyword that's provided by TypeScript to do this specific thing. And yeah, we're just trying to avoid the use of as. So we can provide these functions. The interesting bit, the thing that kind of tripped me up at first, was this isBook just returns a Boolean value. So you have to create a function that then tests the book and then either returns it or returns something else. So yeah, I thought it would actually just return the value as a book, but no, it doesn't return the value. It just returns true, false. Is the value of the correct type or not? But yeah, yeah.
The generic object you're referencing there, your isObject function, that's your own definition for generic object, right?
It is correct. I just wrote this. And it's just kind of to avoid having to write this, which is a little, it means the same thing, but it's just hard to understand. It's not as clear. So I call it that. Yeah. And it is so handy. I've used it in every single one of them. All right. Boom, boom, boom. Oh, yeah, all the way in the back.
Yeah, so for handling refactors when any is introduced early on in the project's lifecycle, how do you go about pulling that out?
Yeah, so I mean, the first step is to try and just replace with unknown, and that works sometimes. If you've accessed a property on there, well, then you do know something about it. So you have to then type in the definition. So it's similar to that one we looked at the beginning. Yeah, here. So first thing you do is just put unknown in there. And then you start to look at how it's used, and it'll error if you try to access anything. So then you know what you're trying to access, and so then you can replace that with, you know, detail. And maybe we still don't know what detail is. But we at least just give it that next layer down.
Got it. So you kind of backpedal your way into it. Okay.
Absolutely.
And the ideal scenario is not to use unknown or any, of course, right? You want to get down to the core types for every one of your objects or variables.
Yeah.
Those are kind of just when all else fails.
Well, any is meant as a developer tool, as a helper. So we'll look at some times when you might want to use that. Unknown, on the other hand, is a legitimate base type, and it's for times when you legitimately don't know what the thing is. And so there, I mean, unknown is publishable code. Any, you better get some code reviews on that before you decide to put it into production. Yeah.
How do you feel about any like unit tests or also that? Mocking.
It's up to the engineering team. That's definitely something a team needs to decide. Certainly tests don't need as much type checking, and it can be a really big waste of time to try and solve some dumb problem in the test when you can just skip past it. Because mostly we care about the production code, the code that actually runs. But yeah, that's up to the team. And I try, you know, when I join a team, a new team, I say, let's have a meeting. Let's get together and decide all these issues. Where are the lines so that we can all be doing it the same? But, yeah. Okay, so the journey of TypeScript. So if you don't have TypeScript, it's a real value. It's made by Microsoft. I usually don't like Microsoft-y things, but this one actually turned out pretty good. So you're going to add it to your build system if you're using Webpack or Vite or anything else. You're going to, first step is just to add it to the build system and turn strict off. So you want to start by strict false. And that makes TypeScript as loosey-goosey as it can be. And in that loose state, that's when you're going to go through and rename your JSX files to TSX. When you do that, well, now the build system is going to use the TypeScript compiler, and it's going to type check all of those files. So those files now you have to add all the types in. Now, because the inference engine in TypeScript is so good, I'd say at least, 40% of the time, you can simply rename the file and you're done. So that's great. But not all of them are that easy. Sometimes you get into one and it takes a little bit. Sometimes you just have to define one type and then you're done. Sometimes it takes a lot more than that. So what a lot of teams do is this kind of part and parcel method where they say, as we're working on the code base, when we go to update a new feature, we're going to transition that one feature into TypeScript. And so you do it one file at a time as you touch each file. And eventually, you'll have edited the entire code base and everything will be moved over to TypeScript. There's just no way to predict how long that's going to take. But this at least does not incur additional dev time, right? To do it all at once is a big effort, and that's an effort that you're not getting any new features out of. So a lot of managers and product people want you to just pay it off as you go. If you are able to go do it all at once, that's going to be much faster. As you're doing this, particularly when you're trying to do it all at once, there are these usual suspects of helpers. You'll notice some of them that we've already talked about, that you can use during the time that you're transitioning from JSX to TSX. As is one of those, the exclamation point, again, just disables type checking. Here I've created a TypeScript error and this tsignore comment. Oop. If I take that out, now the error shows up. But if there's an error and you just can't get rid of it, hey, you can ignore it. And these are not things that I would recommend doing, but the problem is that when you're transitioning to TypeScript, in the middle of that transition, when TypeScript is trying to infer all of the stuff in your new TSX files, some of the things it's importing are still coming from the old JSX files. And so that really kind of freaks it out. It doesn't quite know what to do all the time. And what you're going to end up with is cases where you have errors that are not really real errors. And we just kind of want to skip past them for now, because once we get everything over to TypeScript, we can then go and take all these things out. We can then go start combating the problems of any and start trying to, and what you'll find is you put the tsignores in, you'll get everything over to TypeScript, and then you go and take them out, and there's no more error. The error that it was ignoring doesn't exist anymore because it was based on the stuff coming in from old JSX files. So let me give an example of that. So this is one I found in the wild. Pretty simple building type. It has an address that's required. Can have expired or active, and those are both optional, and they're Booleans. And this function, all it does is take an array of buildings, and then it returns a map of those buildings where it looks at each building, and it uses --omit to omit the expired property, get rid of that one, and then it destructures that object into a new object and adds on the active true. So that's how we activate buildings in this application. Cool. There's nothing wrong with this function. There's nothing wrong with it in terms of JavaScript. There's nothing wrong with it in terms of TypeScript. It's got its types. It's totally fine. And in fact, I didn't get any error in my code editor, in VS Code. The IDE did not error because there is no error here. But then when we ran it through the build system, yeah, it was actually 469. It says there was an error on this line. And the error is expects 2 arguments and received 1. But line 469 is not a function. In fact, the only function we call is map. Do we need to add index here? No, that doesn't help at all. Still gets the same error during build on some weird line number that makes no sense, some error message that makes no sense. This is exactly the type of thing that happens during that transition moment going from JSX to TSX. And so this, for this one, I did actually figure it out. All I did is comment out line after line until I figured out it was actually this line that I was upset about. If I commented this line out, the error went away. So I just had to rewrite the function in a slightly different way. We still omit expired, and we still add active. And the destructuring here was creating a new object, but omit creates a new object all by itself, right? It doesn't return a reference copy of this object. It returns a fresh object that we store here. So we can just set the active property on it and return this. TypeScript, totally happy with that. It's the exact same thing. All we did is remove this little destructure, and it's actually less code, so that's good. It's just a little more simple. So sometimes that's what it wants, is for you just to rewrite the JavaScript a little bit to make it just a little more simple, so that as that inference engine kind of finds its way down, finds its way through the code, it can do a better job of understanding what each of these lines, with what effect each of these lines have on the typing. So then you're going to go through and remove the helpers. And, you know, what you'll find if you use the exclamation point here and here, those can be, you know, just replaced with question marks. The question mark is JavaScript. The exclamation point is TypeScript. So the JavaScript one works just as well. The difference is that if we really want this thing to be a string, well, with these question marks in here, this whole statement might result in a null value. And so we add the double question at the end. If it's null or undefined, go ahead and give it a default value. And I think that's the main difference that I see between engineers that work in JSX and engineers that work in TSX, is that in JavaScript, you don't have to provide default values for things very often. You just kind of assume that they are what they are. And then you get a type error later on in the browser. And when you convert everything to TypeScript, you end up having to provide a lot more default values. What if this is not true? What if this does not exist? What should our author value be? So then get strict. So if you remember at the beginning, we said turn strict mode off. Well, we want to turn strict mode back on, and that's kind of our done moment. When we can finally turn strict mode back on, we're totally done. We're completely migrated over to TypeScript. And you do want to turn strict mode on. To run TypeScript without strict mode, it's not really TypeScript. Let me give you an example here. Strict null checks. So we had strict null checks turned off. I say we, one project that I worked on. And yet, the definition for a React node is that it can either be a JSX object or a string, or null, or undefined. That's just part of the React node's basic definition. And we wanted it to be a React node, but we didn't want it to be the null value. So we added this TypeScript thing, non-nullable, which you put around the type, and then it says that just means it is this type, but it can't be null. Except that we had this set to false. And what strict null checks does when it's false is it allow lists null values. That means now anything can be null. Anytime you type something as a string, it means a string or null. So null values just get a ticket all the way through everything without any TypeScript errors. So this is the first one that I think you would, this is the first one that you'd want to try and fix. And in your TS config, you can simply set this one to true, and you only get that one check. Here's all the checks that are part of strict mode. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 of them. And you're going to want to turn them on one at a time. And strict null checks is one of the more difficult ones. It's a good one to start with. And it just makes sure that you, in fact, do use null values like every other type, that they don't, they have to be checked like everything else. So, you know, on an average code base, you may end up with 400 occurrences, say, of this, of new problems that will occur, new errors that you'll get when you turn this on. So you turn it on and you go and knock down 20 of them, merge that in, turn it back off. And you keep doing that until you can turn it on permanently. And that's great, because once you have it turned on, all future code will be written, you know, with that additional strictness. So strict property initialization, strict bind call, and no implicit this. These three are super easy. And once you've done this one, you can basically go and just do all these. Easy peasy. And, oh, sorry, questions? Correct, yes.
For line 514, no implicit any. Does TypeScript have implicit types? Like if you have that set to true, do you have to explicitly set your type for every variable?
Not for everything. The inference engine still works. So like when I had my strings, there was just 2 properties. It inferred that. I didn't have to tell it what it was. And so that all works. The thing with no implicit any is when the inference engine is going through things, if it doesn't know what the thing is and it's trying to infer, it infers it as any. And that's called an implicit any because you may not even notice because it did it behind the scenes. You have to hover over it to see what it typed it as to see. So when you turn this on, you're saying the inference engine is no longer allowed to use any.
How does that work with dependencies?
What do you mean?
If we have dependencies, like I noticed, I'm just starting with TypeScript, and I noticed like you'll have in your package JSON, you'll have like at types, and then you'll have like type checking for the dependency packages that you have. How does that work if your dependencies aren't using TypeScript?
A lot of dependencies do use TypeScript. So you shouldn't run into that problem very often. There is a project, the @types, that you see. Those what he's talking about is you can import libraries of types. So if the library that you're importing didn't do TypeScript, somebody else went and did all the TypeScript for them and published that as a separate library. And you can almost always find those. They've done a very thorough job. I have not run into a library that didn't have type checking in a very long time. Not to say it's not going to happen, though. It can happen. There's a lot of libraries out there. So when those things come in, yeah, it's going to try and infer, and it's not always going to do a good job. So it's going to try to infer as any, and then when you have no implicit any, then it's going to error, and it's going to say, I don't know what this thing is. And so then you have to tell it what it is. So my point was, do this one. It's kind of hard, but it's a good one to start with. And then you would do these three. There's probably 1 or 2 errors, and that's all. And then strict function types just makes function parameters. When they're passed from one function to another, they have to match more carefully. So that one, it's not super hard. And then you'll get down to this one, and that's the bear. That's like if there were 400 of these, then there were probably only 3 of these. 50 of these, there's probably 800 of those. Like, that's the big one. And those are difficult problems to solve because you either have to add an any, which we don't want to do, or you have to figure out what that thing is, and that's not always super easy. So in any event, once you get past this one, then you can turn strict on, and that includes all the ones above, and you're done. Yay! And that's pretty much all I had. So yeah, any more thoughts, questions, comments? Keep them coming. Yeah.
In your 20 years of experience, how frequently have you seen this as a large source of tech debt in large databases? Startups in particular, I can see this being something that gets brought up a lot. Until they have enough, funds and engineers to really tackle something like this. How frequently would you say that's the case?
Yes, that definitely happens. What I see more than just any's everywhere, like it's people kind of understand that they're not supposed to use that one. So you'll see a couple of them, but since they have strict mode turned off, they're like null values are fine, function parameters not matching, fine, implicit any's fine. So they just turn strict mode off, and then they're making a lot of problems, but they just don't, it does an error, so they don't care. And some people, yeah, it works. And some people feel like that's faster. For me, I like the strict TypeScript. Like when someone asks me, do you want to do this in JSX or TSX? I'm like, I'm faster in TypeScript. And I'm faster in strict mode. And yeah, so sometimes you get into little things where you don't know what to do and you have to spend a little extra time designing or figuring out a type. That time is extra. But just the process of writing the code, I just write it bug-free from the start. It used to be, before TypeScript, 90% of the errors that I would see in the browser were type error. Such and such does not exist on such and such. All of those type errors go away because they error for you right when you write them. So it's like, oh, okay, I just need to fix that right now. Does that make sense? Yeah. Cool. Oh, we got one. Got a couple more. Okay. Spatula's coming.
How do you decide when to use the type versus the interface?
It's a interesting question. Like here I did type book, and I could have just said interface. Oop, gotta spell it right. And the only difference is you get rid of the equal sign. When TypeScript started, interface and type were totally different, and they did different things. They worked differently. And then as TypeScript evolved, they kept moving them closer together. Everything that one could do, they started making it so the other one could do that too. And now at this point, they can both do everything. So technically, the only difference is the syntax. How you write it, exactly which words. Do you put an equal sign or not? Little things like that. And so people have preferences, and it's really just that. It's a personal preference, and as a team, you should probably agree to do it one way or the other. But they can both do the same thing. The one real reason that there is a reason to use one versus the other is simplicity. If typing it in interface is going to be a lot of lines, and typing it with type is shorter, or vice versa, then you would choose that one. But yeah, you can go back and forth. It doesn't make any difference. I think we had another one over here. Yeah.
Speaking. I heard TypeScript's getting ready to be written in Go. Any excitement or things that you're looking forward to with that, or do you expect it to be just about the same experience, just faster?
We were talking about it a little before we started. Apparently Go is native code, and that's why it runs faster, that it used to run on top of Node.js. And so now Go lets them do it in base, lower level code so that it can run much faster. That's exciting. I don't know that I don't know that that's a bottleneck for me, the speed of it. I have been troubleshooting a lot of build issues lately where you change one thing and you have to wait for it to rebuild to see if it worked. And in those situations, that could save a lot of time. But yeah, I think it's a slow progression, a march forwards of all the tools. And they're just kind of slowly making everything better and faster. All right. One more. All right, well, thank you all.
Sure. Yeah, thank you so much, Bishop. That was great. So we probably have 10, 15 minutes if you guys want to keep networking. I'll say whenever you get up, please take your chair and put it on. We're going to get the rack out and put it on the rack. That would be great. Our next meetup is Tuesday, April 22nd, and it's going to be lightning talks. So we'd love to have you give a talk. It's okay if it's your first time giving a talk. It's okay if it's about something completely beginner. It could literally be intro to TypeScript or why I still use jQuery. We'd love to hear some talks. Please submit DenverScript.com, and we'll see you next time. Thank you so much.